Prologue. The spark of rebellion and the storm raged over Grimspire Academy, its spires piercing the dark clouds like jagged teeth. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the ancient stone walls and casting long shadows across the courtyard. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and the low hum of controlled magic. Students whispered incantations, their hands moving in precise, practiced motions, while Archmage Lyra watched from the shadows, her icy gaze scanning for any deviation from tradition. Victoria, her fiery red hair escaping its braid, sat at the edge of the classroom, her fingers drumming restlessly on the desk. She hated this, the rigid rules, the endless rituals, the way Lyra's voice cut through the room like a whip. Magic wasn't meant to be caged, it was meant to live. Victoria, Lyra's voice snapped, pulling her from her thoughts. Your focus is lacking, again. The other students stifled laughter as Victoria stood, her cheeks burning. She raised her hands, mimicking the gestures she'd been taught, but the spell fizzled in her palms. Lyra's lips thinned. Magic is not a toy, girl. It is a discipline, a weapon, and you are wasting its potential. Victoria clenched her fists, the sting of humiliation sharp in her chest. But beneath it, something else simmered, a spark of defiance. She didn't need their rules. She didn't need their rituals. That night, as the storm reached its peak, Victoria slipped out of the dormitory and climbed to the academy's highest tower. The wind whipped her hair into a frenzy, and the rain soaked through her robes. But she didn't care. She stood at the edge, her arms outstretched, and closed her eyes. The lightning called to her. It wasn't a spell. It wasn't a ritual. It was raw, untamed power, and it answered her like an old friend. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and pulled. The bolt that struck her was blinding, a searing white light that lit up the night. It didn't burn her, it filled her. She laughed, the sound lost in the thunder, and hurled the energy into the distance. It arced across the sky, striking the ancient artifact in the courtyard, a relic of the Academy's founders. The explosion shook the ground, and for a moment, the world was silent. Then the screams began. Victoria stared in horror as flames engulfed the courtyard, but before she could react, the lightning surged again, this time guided by her panic. It struck the flames, extinguishing them in an instant. The artifact was gone, reduced to rubble, but the Academy and the city beyond was safe. When the dust settled, Lyra stood in the doorway, her face pale with fury. What have you done? Victoria didn't answer. She couldn't. The power still hummed in her veins, wild and intoxicating. She had broken the rules, and in doing so, she had found something far greater. But as she met Lyra's gaze, she saw something else in the Archmage's eyes, fear and jealousy. The storm passed, but the spark it had ignited in Victoria would not be extinguished. Chapter 1. Victoria. The Lightning Revolution. The halls of Grimspire Academy were never the same after that night. The shattered artifact became a symbol of rebellion for some, of chaos for others. Victoria, once a troublemaker, was now a pariah. Lyra's lectures grew harsher, her punishments more severe, but Victoria refused to be cowed. She began experimenting in secret, gathering a small group of like-minded students. They called themselves the Storm Circle, and together they pushed the boundaries of what magic could do. Victoria's heart spark technique, channeling lightning through raw emotion, became their signature, a defiant middle finger to the Academy's rigid traditions. But Lyra was watching, and she wasn't alone. Chapter 2. Zaen, the Pure Flame of Destiny. Far from the storm-tossed spires of Grimspire, in the quiet halls of Emberhold Temple, Zaen knelt before the sacred flame. The white fire flickered gently, its light pure and unyielding. It was said to be a gift from the gods, a tool to cleanse curses and heal wounds. But to Zaen, it was a burden. His family, the keepers of the flame, had served it for generations. They were revered, but their lives were not their own. Zaen's father had died tending the flame. His mother had sacrificed her voice to it, and now it was his turn. Archmage Kale, his mentor, stood behind him, his voice low and steady. The flame is not just a tool, Zaen. It is a test. Only the worthy can wield it without being consumed. Zaen nodded, but his mind wandered. He had always been different, quieter, more introspective. While others saw the flame as a weapon, he saw it as a mystery. During a ritual to cleanse a cursed artifact, Zaen's curiosity got the better of him. Instead of channeling the flame, he absorbed it. The curse surged into him, twisting and burning, but the flame within him transformed it into something new, a white fire that burned brighter than ever before. When he opened his eyes, the artifact was cleansed, but Zaen's memories of his childhood were gone. Kale stared at him, a mix of awe and fear in his eyes. "What have you done?" Zaen didn't know, but he would find out. He would. Chapter 3. The Clash of the Elements. The birth of the Avatar, the Magicians Bazaar, in Metropolis X was a riot of color and sound, a place where magic was bought, sold, and bartered. Victoria wandered the stalls, her fingers crackling with barely contained energy, while Zaen moved through the crowd like a shadow, his white flame flickering faintly in his palm. They didn't mean to meet, but when a rusted chimera, a mechanical monstrosity created by the Syndicate, went berserk, setting the bazaar ablaze, their paths collided. Victoria reacted first, hurling a bolt of lightning at the creature. Zaen, seeing the flames spread, summoned his white fire to contain them. Their magics clashed, lightning and flame, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Then something extraordinary happened. The lightning wrapped around the flames, creating a swirling vortex of energy. The chimera was obliterated, and the fire extinguished, leaving behind a strange, shimmering light. Victoria laughed, her eyes sparkling. "Your fire is boring. It needs some spice." Zaen raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "And your lightning is chaos. You'll burn yourself out one day." But as they stood there, the energy between them crackling with possibility, they both felt it, a connection. Their magics were opposites, but together they were something more. And in that moment, unbeknownst to them, a new destiny was born. New dynasty, Stormborn, their daughter Lyra, was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Her eyes shone like neutron stars, and her hair burned with a white flame that never consumed. Her cries summoned storms, and her laughter healed wounds. But her power came at a cost. She aged twice as fast as a normal child, her body struggling to contain the immense energy within her. Victoria and Zaen knew they had to protect her, not just from the Syndicate, who saw her as a weapon, but from the world itself. As they fled through the streets of Metropolis, Lyra clutched in their arms. Victoria turned to Zaen. "She's not a weapon," she said fiercely. "She's a new beginning." Zaen nodded, his white flame flickering in his palm. "Then we'll make sure she has a world worth living in." But the shadows were already closing in, and in the distance, the storm was gathering. "Our daughter is not a weapon. She is a new beginning." Victoria and Zaen, while escaping from Syndicate soldiers,